Well, thank you for having me back. And I was asked to comment about the National Action Plan, which is our current working document for the vision for the country. And so I'm just going to walk you through that a little bit, but you all have in your handout there the actual plan itself. And many of the authors, 4 of the key 6 core people who developed that plan are here in the audience today. But just commenting on, what we're talking about today, the middle section here is some news clippings of actual events, and we now have on a website called cultivatesafety.org the update news clippings as they come out within usually a week. They are posted on the website, so there's a constant place where people can go and see what is the latest fatal or non-fatal injury event affecting a child in agriculture. So one of the things that we're looking at now in terms of the big picture is David shared the latest injury trends, and so our picture of what's going on out there has changed over the years, and he was sharing with you the data having to do with children, young people working in agriculture, but let's keep in mind that still up to 3/4 of the children who are injured and killed on farms are not even working. So this conference here is to talk about tractors and youth working, but we still have this other part of what's going on in the farming environment that is not dealing with the work itself. So what we looked at for updating the National Action Plan had to do with changes that are going on with not only the injury, but what's going on with production agriculture, new types of communication, working with people, and how to reach people, and what has happened with the funding that's available. Because we've heard about NIOSH funds that have been out there since 1997, USDA funds, and a lot of private sector funds that have gone into solving these problems out there. But when I look at the picture and what's changed, I say what's really changed is we're looking at the working population as a very specific group. We pretty much know what needs to be done to protect these young people so that they can work in agriculture, so they can be on farms. Well, we don't necessarily know how to translate that into behavior changes, and we don't know how to reach some of the hard-to-reach populations, such as the migrant workers who may not have access to the same types of educational programs, or some of the hard-to-reach populations like the Anabaptist population. So some of the key points that went into this document and to the whole world of protecting children who are exposed to agricultural hazards have to do with using child development principles as the basis for when and where children should be involved. And you'll be hearing more about that in tomorrow's session. The other issue has to do with the government's role. And in previous years, we thought, well, the government should just, have regulations and that should take care of it. But we know now that that is not the way that we're going to really make a huge impact on these hard-to-reach populations and family farms where the regulations do not fit for a number of reasons. So we have to look at what is the role of the federal government or the state government. Some of that can be providing the education to the regulators so that they can help people do a better job of enforcing the laws that are out there, and then also just to provide some oversight and help guide some of the national strategies. We talk about tractors. Tractors still remain the #1 agent associated with deaths and injury and serious injuries, and not necessarily that youth are operating tractors, but many times kids are near them, or if it's not a tractor, it's a skid steer or some type of heavy equipment that is associated with many of the most gruesome or fatal events. We also know that supervision in and of itself is not a sufficient strategy. A case review of all of the childhood deaths on farms in Canada revealed that nearly every one of those deaths had a parent or an adult within eyesight of the child who was killed. So we have to get past that notion that as long as I'm supervising that child, they're safe, because that's not one of the basic principles of protecting kids, which is to provide a barrier between the hazard and the child itself. And then we know that we need multifaceted strategies. There are no silver bullets. Many things need to be repeated, done many different ways, and continued over time. And the other thing that's different than from other public health strategies is that many times we don't have the data. We don't really have the data that can show exactly if you do this or you invest this, then the result is going to be that, because we can't have really excellent evaluation studies in an agricultural environment, just too cost prohibitive to do such. So a lot of the strategies that have been proposed and the guidelines that have been developed were done by consensus and best guess, and then studied over time to see if they actually work. So there's 7 different key recommendations that go into the National Action Plan, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first has to do with leadership, that we still would like to have a key agency in the United States government that sort of overrides and oversees all of this to keep all of us connected so we're not duplicating work across different domains. And we also feel that there's this whole document itself has a lot of recommendations, and some of us who worked on it would like to just pick out our favorite one and just say, let's just go for one thing and try that, but we can't quite do that. One of the things, interesting trends, and I'll turn to Frank because he knows about this, is the whole area of corporate social responsibility, that many of the big agricultural industries, and whether they're producers or the Walmarts, are really looking at how can we be better citizens? How do we get more involved? And what's our role in getting this message out and providing safe and appropriate food sources for the consumers? So you'll see a lot about shared values and corporate social responsibility, and more organizations getting involved in this whole role of how can I be helpful with this. We're very appreciative for the data that we have, and I think that the adult agricultural injury world is very envious of the data that we have in terms of children, because this is the one area that we really do have learned so much by having excellent data to see how things have changed over time. In terms of research, we're really looking at knowing more about why do people behave the way they behave, and what are the barriers or the motivators to get them to change their behaviors, because we still don't really know how to influence adults to make more appropriate choices about when and what children can do in agriculture. Sometimes it's intentional, many times it's unintentional that they make choices that actually put children at risk. We also talked about public policy and many of the gaps in terms of public policy, but we'd like to see certain policies. I'm thinking of providing funds for childcare, off-farm childcare. That could be a public policy that then enables farmers to have a safer environment for children right on their farm. And organization policies is an area where we really see things changing in the future, that organizations such as the American Agri-Bankers Association or the insurance agencies, that they can be taking a role in getting this message out, that if we are going to provide funds to work with your farm so you can expand it, then in turn you will be asked to have certain types of safety policies and procedures. And we see this whole sort of, we call it the spheres of influence. Where are those groups that really influence the farmer into what he's going to be doing on his farm? Who are those people, or those sort of chains of influence that we can work through to change practices at the root level? So, and then we also look at organizations having policies, and I think the National FFA is a great one, where we get going with young people from the start, that if you're going to be operating a tractor, make sure that it's inherently safe, that young people should not be operating tractors that do not have roll bars or seat belts. And these could be organization policies, just like 4-H requiring helmets for kids doing equestrian activities, that organizations can be putting through those policies that then slowly by slowly change that culture of what's expected. We think of simple things like now, if there's a rollover, a motor vehicle crash, we know from the report, was that person wearing a seatbelt? Wouldn't it be interesting if the reporters would say, well, there was a tractor rollover, somebody was thrown from the tractor, gosh, they didn't have a roll bar on that tractor, there wasn't a seat belt. And we believe that young people should not be asked to operate tractors that are not inherently safe. So that's how organizations can get more involved in changing what's going on out there. Interventions, we know a lot again about what interventions work, which ones don't, and we want to know which ones are the most cost effective so that we can really put our money where it's going to have the greatest impact. And if you ask Amy or myself, we'll say, let's get some of those kids into off-farm childcare for while the parents are working so that the parents can focus on the work and the kids can have a safe environment at the same time. So people's and organization roles are changing. When this all started, NIOSH was the lead role agency. We needed to do more research. We needed to understand how to protect kids. We assumed that most of the kids who were being injured were working, and some of that has changed now. We're not real sure where this is all going to be going in the future, and where do those different agencies, where do their lines fall into place in terms of responsibility as we look at some of these different things that are going on. And people have asked, so when are we going to have the next update for the National Action Plan? And I think that's going to be up to people like you to decide if and when we need another one. Someday we hope that we solve this whole problem and we won't need to keep coming up with future strategies, because we want the world to be safe out there. We want young people to be doing the things you want to do in agriculture because it's so important. And we really want for employers to be able to hire young people to do safe and appropriate work as well.